Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight to learn more about the North Quincy Cable Replacement Project. I'd like to start off the evening by letting our viewers know that this program tonight can be viewed in multiple languages. We have interpreters available for Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Spanish. To choose which language you want to hear this in, please just go to the bottom of the screen and you will see a little globe icon. If you choose the globe icon, you can then pick which language you would like to hear this in. So to let you know, this evening's program will be done in two separate parts. The first part will be Brian Dunn, our project manager, going through some information about this very important infrastructure project. The second part will then have a Q&A or question and answer session. This question and answer session is your opportunity to ask our team of experts questions that you have about this project. They can range from construction to what you can expect to see while this project is underway and timelines. I'd like to thank everybody ahead of time for taking the time to learn about this project and to let you know that we are here to keep an open dialogue with the community and the city of Quincy. With that said, one of the first things that I'd like to ask you all to do is answer a question so that we can understand how basically to level set our communications. So the first question that we're going to ask everyone, you'll see the pop-up on a screen and you can choose your answer, is how familiar are you with this project? And hopefully you can all see that polling question. I'll give it another.
Yep, it's up, Danielle.
Perfect. I will give it another 10 seconds. And I will turn it over to Brian Dunn, our project manager, to introduce the project team and go through the slide deck. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is there going to be, there we go, the presentation. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend our meeting tonight. We're here to go over our project we call the Quincy Cables Project. So on our project team here on the call tonight, we have most of our subject matter experts that have been part of the team for the last couple of years, some a little less, but some a little more. My name is Brian Dunn. I'm the project manager. We also have on the call Alex Smith, our underground engineer, our lead environmental scientist, Erin Warinsky, David Clinch, who's our also helping out with licensing and permitting. David is one of our consultants. He works for Epsilon Associates. Vic Antonello is our principal engineer. He works for EC Engineering. And we have Joe Carroll and Joe Cardinal, who are community outreach managers and directors for the Quincy area. And also Danielle, who did our introductions tonight. Danielle runs all the stakeholder and outreach activities for this project, and as well as many others. So that's our project team. And we'll go through the presentation tonight. And if you have questions, we will have a Q&A period afterwards that you can follow up with that and go through and ask your questions at that time. So next slide, please. Okay, project overview. So National Grid, you know, one of the things we do is we continuously look at all of our assets and evaluate opportunities to, you know, improve our networks, both, you know, reliability and, you know, to make sure everything's up to the latest and greatest. So it's why we're planning on investing in the city of Quincy and the infrastructure that we're going to be upgrading these transmission projects. A strong electrical transmission system is vital to the region's safety, security, and economic prosperity. So our project tonight is replacement of two direct buried cables with two new cables in a different type of system. It's going to be in a duct bank and conduit and manhole system. These two existing cables connect our North Quincy and Field Street substations and have been in service for about 50 years and are nearing the end of their service life. So that's why we're going to be replacing them. So we've been working with, state and municipal leaders, a lot of folks from the city of Quincy for the last few years to come up with the best way to replace these cables, and have selected the appropriate project routes, for the where we're going to replace the cable. And that's been a pretty long process with a lot of input, and that's kind of has what led us up to today with initiating the project, which has been done in two phases, but we can get into that in a minute. So this is a continuation of that work. So it's to install a new modern cable system that will allow us to provide reliable electric service to our area customers. The new cables will also address maintenance issues, which the older cables are more subject to failures, either through the age of the cables or other mechanical things like dig-ins, just because of the way that they were designed. Next slide, please. So to ensure, the reliable delivery of continuous electricity to our area customers, National Grid replacement project will replace the two underground cables between our North Quincy and Field Street substations. Both of these substations are located in the city of Quincy. They're originally installed in the 70s. These are direct buried cables that need to be replaced to improve reliability. As these cables have aged, they've become more prone to disruptions and are more difficult and expensive to repair. Some of the repair work on them has become even more difficult by a lack of craftsmanship and workmen's craftsmen that are available to actually do these types of repairs. I think the last few times we've had to do repairs, they've actually had to get some crews in from Canada to do the repairs, because it is such a specialty and is somewhat limited today. Next slide, please. More on the project need. The old cables, like I said, they're direct buried. It's a different type of system. There's two cables buried side by side in thermal sand, and there's a concrete cap on top. You can see on the picture on the right, the existing cables, sort of, one monolithic cable with all the electrical cables in one, sort of giant cable system. Next slide, please. So the project benefits, the biggest benefit is going to be more reliable electric transmission grid in Quincy that allows us to deliver electricity to our area customers. So reliability is probably, the number one thing. And there's also a lot of safety issues along with it as well, where some of the other mechanical intrusions into the duct bank through dig-ins will be a lot less likely to occur, because our new system will be in a concrete duct bank and encased in concrete. So those sort of accidental dig-ins are a lot less likely to happen. Continue with the benefits. The modern cables installed within a concrete duct bank and manhole system will reduce the need to excavate large sections of public ways for repair and maintenance. Currently now with the direct buried cables, it's a lot harder to find where the faults are, where the dig-ins have happened, or there's also a fluid that's within the cables that serves the purpose of keeping the cables cooler from overheating. And finding those leaks are difficult. With the duct bank system, it's a lot easier to trace things back, and it's just a lot safer as an encasement of the electrical conduits. Reduce construction impact by utilizing the existing route. So our new cable system, the project route will follow the existing route of the cables. We will parallel it pretty much the entire way. there's a little bit at the beginning of the project near the North Quincy substation where we deviate a little bit, but then the rest of it within the roadways is the exact same parallel route. So this will, reduce disruptions long-term because it'll be the same route that we install the cables on that we then have to go back and remove the old cables from. Also be increased municipal tax revenue to the city. These will be some substantial numbers over at least the beginning of the first 5 or 10 years after the project is fully installed. And also, as part of our efforts, we'll do a lot of pavement restoration to do some paving for the surface, not just over our trenches, but a little bit wider than that to give more of a monolithic surface to the roadway rather than having just the linear trench patches going down the road. Next slide, please. So here's the project route map, and it's been done in 2 phases. So phase 1 is the one we completed last summer. This started up around 100, 150 Newport Avenue extension. The work finished up about just past West Squantum Street overpass. So phase 2 will begin now this spring, and it will begin in the area just after the West Squantum Street overpass. So some of you may have seen the work that we had done last summer, especially on the Newport Avenue extension up that way. We did have crews out in the roadways for several weeks, putting the new lines in, and we'll continue that path down from just south of West Squantum Street, down Newport Avenue, taking a left onto Furnace-Brook Parkway, and then taking a right down Southern Artery to Morrison Street, and then into our Field Street substation. So the construction we're talking about tonight is phase 2. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives a pictorial of the construction process. One of the first things we'll do is start installing the new manholes. These are fairly large splice vaults. They're underground. It's large cables with high voltage electricity. They're fairly substantial. Our crews will go out and start spotting those. They're about every, maybe third of a mile or so apart. So they're a pretty good distance. So the crews will start with that, and then they'll come behind them and start to put in the conduit and duct bank. So they'll saw cut the pavement, dig the trenches, put the conduit in as the top picture on the right shows. That'll get backfilled, and then we'll resurface or put the final trench patch on. The final trench patch, I know it says temporary asphalt, but we're installing it more of a permanent condition because there could be several winter seasons in between when the conduit and duct bank system is installed to when we get to the point where we're at final paving. So after the duct bank and manhole system is in, we'll have, again, setups in the roadway, but these are fairly limited in their duration and sort of setup where they'll pull and splice the cable. So they'll be set up just over the manholes. And in the 3 miles, there's 11 manholes. 2 of them are off the roadway. So there's 9 manholes in the roadway. They're in pairs. So there's actually a total of 18. And they'll set up over each one and pull the cables in and go in and splice them. And I can't quite see there, Danielle, there's the 5 languages. There's a sign, a little banner on the bottom. I can't quite see what the bullets are on the bottom right picture, but I think it just shows our final paving and kind of what it looks like when we're done.
Yes, you're correct, Brian.
Next slide, please. Oh, there it goes. It's disappeared. So this is kind of like the train of construction events. Now, they're not necessarily going to be, this sequential in time, and you wouldn't see them like this, but this is sort of, the operations that'll happen. So you'd see the crews out there saw cutting the paving, then they'll excavate it, put in the conduit, backfill, do a the trench restoration and put final paving on top. Then you'll see the crews come in probably several weeks later in some areas and maybe several months later in others, maybe even the following construction season, setting up over the manholes and pulling in the cable and splicing the cable. And then when it's all done, we would do our final sort of monolithic restoration of the pavement surface to have a uniform surface across the width of the road. Next slide, please. Duct bank continued. Okay, a little bit more the same. So, step one, excavate. We can go through all the steps over there. This gives a little bit of an idea of what the crews are up against. So, we will have, crews in the street, and they will need to be supplied by different types of other construction vehicles, whether that's, a concrete truck in this case, where they're pouring the concrete encasement for the duct bank. It could be gravel, it could be other supply trucks, it could be some of the other trucks supporting, the entire conduit installation and some of the manholes and different things like that. So you'll see crews coming in and out, and part of this will be, we do have traffic management plans to direct traffic, and we also will have police details from hopefully mostly from the city of Quincy supporting the effort. And so you should see quite a few of the Quincy police out there helping us with our police details to safely direct traffic around our work areas. Next slide, please. Okay, same thing on the manhole process. Like I said, these are fairly large vaults. They're about the size of a shipping container, and they get buried under the ground. So within that, they're fairly substantial, and it's a big operation to put them in. So the crews you see doing this will be, moving up and down the route. We'll be working around some of the city's projects as well. The DPW has a number of paving, water, and sewer projects that we'll be working around, so as to not have all the construction happening in the same spot at the same time. The manholes go in pairs, so we have replacing two cables. We call them circuits. So each circuit will have its own manhole for the splices, and they'll be, roughly staggered next to each other, somewhat in line with, the general direction of the roadway there, where it's one after another. And after we get them in, that'll be a big step. And then, after that, we end up connecting them with all the duct bank and conduit, and to follow it up by the cable pulling and splicing. Next slide, please. Our commitment. So I don't know if I want to hand this off, Danielle, but certainly our team is committed to making every effort possible to keep the project stakeholders updated. I think we've done a lot of outreach to date. We've had a number of virtual open houses. We've had some other public meetings for the Conservation Commission, for grants of location through the City Council, and I think there was some abutters lists that were distributed fairly wide for those events. And I think for this meeting tonight, I don't want to misquote the numbers, Danielle, but there's, I think several thousand invites that were sent out for this virtual public, pre-construction open house tonight.
Sure, I'll take it from here, Brian. Thanks.
Okay.
So our commitment to let everybody here know, we currently have knocked on roughly about 1,000 doors and left materials at your homes or businesses. And that brings me to our next question, which is, how would you like to receive information about this project? So hopefully the polling question comes up again. Unfortunately, I can't see it, but your answer choices would be through an email newsletter, direct mailing or door-to-door, public meetings, and one-on-one meetings with project staff. So I'll give that a couple of moments. And thank you everyone for taking that time to answer that. It's very helpful for us to understand how you want to receive information. So I'd like to now open this up to our question and answer portion. So I'd like to remind everyone who's on the call, there's multiple ways for you to submit a question should you have one. The first one is you can type it directly into the chat function. You can also use the Q&A button, and you can also raise your hand and ask the question live. Again, we do have interpreters available, so you can also ask your question in either Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, or Spanish, whichever one is more comfortable for you. So to kick that off, I'm actually going to ask one of our most frequently asked questions when it comes to underground projects, which is actually how was the route chosen? And to answer that question, I would like to bring our subject matter expert, David Clinch, to give us an overview on how the route was chosen for this project.
Great, thanks Danielle, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to talk about that tonight. Route selection for major utility infrastructure projects is a very substantial undertaking and something that the company National Grid takes really very seriously. So we underwent a pretty intensive process for over a year to try and determine the best place for us to install these cables. That process included the collection of data for several months on items such as utility density underground and traffic, but also places where we had sensitive resources, such as historical sites, such as areas of high housing density, locations where perhaps there were wetlands or waterways or other sensitive resources nearby. And our goal always is to route away from sensitive resources. We try to prevent construction and construction traffic and construction disturbances from affecting the local community. To that end, we evaluated well over a dozen routes. All those routes started at the North Quincy substation and ended at the Field Street substation. There frankly are endless amounts of ways we could connect those 2 points, but we sought to find a route that was as short as possible, that could be constructed as easily as possible, but also that would have the least impact on the community. And so with all the data on traffic, with all the data we've got on where future utility and future infrastructure projects will be going on, we'd want to avoid, all those things came into play in actually scoring each route. So the full route evaluation took into account about 15 different criteria that we use. Those criteria have previously been approved for use by regulatory agencies such as the Energy Facility Siting Board and MEPA to help us evaluate what all the different alternatives were. The alternative that was ultimately selected was the best alternative from the perspective of routing away from areas of high traffic, routing away from areas of high population density, and routing away from areas of sensitive receptors, including historic resources. So we're confident that the route we've got is the best route from that perspective. No route will have no impacts. All routes always require some work, such as subsurface disturbance. Some of those routes will require, in consultation with the city and the police department, detours and changes to traffic patterns for temporary periods. All of those potential impacts have been closely analyzed and discussed with the city agencies and boards and other regulatory agencies. And that process, again, was well over a year to ensure that we had the right route. And we vetted that route in a variety of ways. And we believe this is the best route for the project with the least impacts. I'd be happy to answer any other questions on the specific criteria or the findings of those evaluations if folks have interest in it. But rest assured, no route is picked simply or easily. They're all looked at very closely and with the concept of avoiding disruption to the public in mind. So that's the general process, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that come about as a result of that.
Thank you, Dave. I always like your explanation on route selection. Our next question is, What is the area impacted by this cable replacement? i.e., are we going to experience power outages and the expected duration? So to give you a quick answer to that is this is a transmission cable project. Transmission is your bulk energy. It's what supplies the city and oftentimes a surrounding area with a very high voltage power, which is then stepped down at a substation and then goes to your homes and businesses. So when we're working on the transmission system, homes, businesses that are on the distribution side of the electric system are not affected by our work on the transmission system. So you should not have any outages at your homes or businesses as a result of this project.
Yeah, and to add to that, Danielle, so, you know, we maybe misuse some language in our business when we talk about outages. You know, there's what the public sees when they call an outage, and then what we have when we have a planned outage within the company to do some work. So we may take the lines out of service for us, which would be an outage, but they're planned, but there's no disruptions to the public with those planned outages. So they're studied and analyzed throughout the entire system. We do an analysis through internally a grid through our control center. And these outages are also submitted ultimately into ISO New England for their review. So we don't initiate outages on the system that would result in customer outages.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question comes from Stephen M. Will all work and construction be in the street, or will sidewalks be disrupted as well? Brian, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, some areas sidewalks will be disrupted. For the new cables, the lines are pretty much exclusively in the roadways. When we remove the existing cables, you know, they were put in sometime in the early 70s, and they kind of meander all over the place. They're within the roadway. They go off the roadway into, you know, a grassed embankment. Some are under sidewalks. Some are in the grass strip between the sidewalks and the curb line. So yes, we will be removing some sidewalk to remove the old cables, but we would of course restore that and put it all back, you know, better than its existing condition now.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question is from Susan C. How will I learn when the intersection close to my home will be impacted? I'm near 3A and Furnace Brook Parkway. 3A and Furnace Brook have become major arteries of the city and are increasingly backed up, especially at highest commute times. So Susan, the best way to get that information is by signing up for the newsletter, which is on the project website, and we will be sharing that towards the end of the program. You can definitely sign up there. We also do canvass the neighborhoods prior to starting any construction. We're usually about a week to 2 weeks out ahead of construction starting in any areas, and we do leave notices on doors if you're not home when we do canvass the area. And then I do believe that we are also working with the various city departments, the DPW and the traffic engineering department in Quincy to identify working hours to be as least impactful as we possibly can, especially during commuting hours. Our next question is from, let me see, sorry, Grant. Nope, I see that one. What's the duration for the disruption in any given stretch of road? And are there dates available for what locations will be affected and when? So, Grant, that's a great question. And again, as we get closer to actually building out a construction schedule that has those details, we will be sharing that again via the website and through the e-newsletter that you can sign up to receive. Usually disruption, I'll let Brian kind of answer about the duration of when we would be in front of your homes or businesses for certain stretches of time. But again, we try to give that week ahead look to everybody that receives the newsletter and again, the canvassing, knocking on doors. Brian, you can go ahead and if you want to kind of expand upon how long when we're in the street, we might
Sure.
be in certain areas.
Yeah, so there's a couple different types of construction that we're doing. One is the conduit and duct bank installation. So that goes along at a certain productivity rate where they could be doing, 20 to 50 feet a day. So it'll kind of chug along. So you might see it in front of your house, a few hundred feet away, and then it'll come by. It'll be right in front of your house, which would be probably the biggest disruption for you. And then it'll kind of slowly move along down the street. So that part of the operation is based on the productivity rate, depends on, how deep the conduits are, what kind of utilities do we have to work around. But, we do have somewhat of a predictability to it to come up with the productivity rate. So it moves along like a very slow moving train, so many feet per day. When they put in the manholes, those large splice vaults, they could be in one location for anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks, putting in the 2 sets of vaults. They are fairly substantial, and some of the areas we put them in are heavily congested with utilities, as well as they're heavily trafficked roadways. They're just more difficult to do. And then when they come back later on, after all the underground stuff is done, and they're pulling in the cables and splicing, they could be at each of the manholes. So they, like I said, they come in pairs. So they could be at those locations for 2 to 3 weeks or more, depending on the lengths of the poles, to pull the cables in and splice them together. But that's kind of the cable pulling and splicing is pretty limited. There's no excavation. It's all things going on within the manhole.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question is a follow-up question from Stephen M. Will access to my property be restricted at any time? So when we're doing the actual duct bank installation, we work with the homeowners, and you will have access to your home, deliveries, your mail. None of that is disrupted. What we do work with homeowners, if you need to get out of your driveway, it just might take a minute or two because they'll have to put a steel plate over, obviously, over the trench. But we do, our construction crews and our supervisors work very closely to make sure that we're not impeding access to your homes. And our outreach team will be out on the front lines, of construction. So we even help Amazon drivers get to your house. We will direct them there. So just keep that open dialogue with us and let us know if there's something that is of importance or concern, and we'll take care of it as best we can.
And I think along those lines, Danielle, so, the 2-week look ahead that you had mentioned, so we know which areas we're working in next. There's our outreach team here with National Grid. There's a complementary outreach person with the contractor. They'll be looking ahead to see if anyone has any, special needs issues. Maybe there's some in one of the residences with the health issue that needs, that absolute 24/7 emergency response if that's needed. So, we'll take those things into consideration, but they'll always be at the ready to come in with steel plates to cover up the trenches so that people can get in and out. So we don't plan on blocking anyone in or out for, hours or days at a time. That's just not the intent. And, along with the rest of the services, like, garbage has to come along. So we're gonna have to be cognizant of that and allow, those guys to collect the trash. And like I said, we're kind of like a slow moving train down the roadway, so many lineal feet per day. So, once you get past our area, or before it, it won't be an interruption. But as we're, in that location just in front of your house or a driveway to a business, there could be some slight disruptions, but we'll try to minimize them by coordinating with, those people.
Thank you, Brian. The next question comes from Susan C. I presume this conduit will be very high electric transmission. Is it like a major overhead transmission cable? Can EMF affect surrounding homes, and how far from the route? So to start that answer off, what I'd like to explain is that the current cable that is in the ground, direct buried, that we are replacing is a 115 kilovolt transmission cable. And we are replacing it with a 115 kilovolt transmission cable in a manhole and duct bank system. EMF, I'm going to turn this over to David Clinch, who very kindly said that he could answer this.
I'm happy to. I'm glad you mentioned that. So this is a replacement project. So any magnetic fields would that are currently present would be. But there's a few really important things to note, and I'm glad that question was asked because it's a good question and there's a good answer to it. To start with, there are no electric fields that would be observable. The reason for that is while every electric appliance and electric cable produces electric and magnetic fields, soil is an excellent insulator against electric fields. So there are no electric fields measurable associated with the project. They're produced by the cable, but they're simply completely blocked by the soil above it. Magnetic fields are not, so magnetic fields do exist. From a perspective of what's allowable, the state of Massachusetts doesn't have a specific number that's allowable for underground lines. There is a quasi-governmental group called the International Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and they set a bunch of standards for electric and magnetic fields. As you mentioned, you would not experience any electric fields even if you were standing immediately above the cable. The standards for magnetic fields are measured in a unit called milligauss, and the standard for industrial workers is 2,000. So there's a 2,000 milligauss per day standard that's allowable for folks to work within that type of environment. When you consider overhead electric lines, the state does have a standard, and that standard is 200 milligauss. And 200 milligauss is a standard at the edge of an electric transmission right-of-way. So I'm happy to be able to say right now that we would be a very small fraction of that allowed 200 limit. It would vary in different places along the road, and it would vary in different places based upon how the cable is used and how much power actually runs through it. But what I can say is that there are no observable electric fields, and the magnetic fields that would be experienced would be a small fraction of what's allowed, and that magnetic field drops off incredibly rapidly with distance. So if you were to have a meter that could measure magnetic fields and you stood immediately over the cable within the road, you would be able to measure the magnetic fields coming from the cable. And again, it would be a very small fraction of what would be allowed for an overhead line, but it drops away very quickly with distance. So by the time you're off to the edge of the road at a residential home, you would not experience likely measurable magnetic fields. And that said, any type of typical small appliance you would use, such as a microwave, an electric toothbrush, would produce magnetic fields much, much greater than those you would experience from this 115 kV line. So I hope that answers the question, but I'm certainly happy to answer any follow-ups on that.
As always, Dave, thank you very much for answering that. Our next question is from Grant, and that is a question about the location of the manholes, and if there's a map that we could share at this time. Grant, we will have a map of the manhole locations up on the website. We're just finalizing it, but it will be up on the website right next to on where the route maps are. And for anyone who is not aware, the website is www.northquincycableproject.com. So we're more than happy to continue to take questions. I think this has been really great. I do appreciate everyone's questions and the team for answering them as well. While we wait to see if there are any more questions, I would like to throw up another polling question, the last one for the evening. So this one would be, would you like to receive the project's e-newsletter? It comes out once a week, and it's just a quick yes or no. And I'll give that a moment or two for people to click. We do have another question from Susan. Are you starting in North Quincy or are we ending in North Quincy? So I think I'm going to throw this back over to Brian to answer. He does love his maps.
I mean, the intent was to start in a linear fashion from where we had ended the phase 1 work, which is up on Newport Avenue, just past West Quantum Street. So we'd start there with the duct bank and manhole system and work south. It doesn't mean that we won't jump around, and jump around meaning, you know, there could be other city projects or other needs that require us to move to different places along the project route to either install manholes or do sections of the duct bank in those areas to get away from, you know, city projects, whether it's paving, water, sewer, just so that we don't create any kind of, you know, gridlock if we have detours around their work and then our work. We just don't want to, you know, detour into each other. So the condo work will pretty much go in a linear fashion. You know, that's at least our starting plan, subject to change depending on city's needs. And the manholes could get spotted, you know, obviously starting along the same linear route, but they may have more crews available to put them in and spot them along different locations along the route to try to expedite things to, you know, clear the roadway, I guess, for other city projects that may be coming along.
Thank you, Brian. We have another question. So from Casey, this webinar was recorded. It will also be posted and hosted on the project's website. Also, the PowerPoint that we were referring to throughout the first portion of this will also be available on the website, and it is also translated into Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Spanish. So again, people can get the information in any one of those languages, whichever one is most comfortable for them. Just give us about 4 or 5 days to get it up onto the website. And again, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time out of your evenings to join us to learn more about this very important infrastructure project. We are excited to start construction and get this going. Again, our commitment is to have that open dialogue with the community and your city leadership. So below you'll see we have a 800 toll line, and that is available 24/7. We also have the website, again, northquincycableproject.com. Our email address as well is info@northquincycableproject.com. And if you are interested in signing up for the newsletter, which will keep you up to date, and you get them weekly, please go onto the website and you can sign up for it through the Contact Us page. You can also call us or email us and we will sign you up for it as well. And with that, I am not seeing any more questions. So I'm going to bid everyone a lovely evening. Spring is around the corner, so please enjoy and please reach out to us with any other questions. Thank you again. Thank you to the project team and thank you to our host community of Quincy. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.